My name is Meredith, 33 years old, and when my boyfriend's first love returned home, he publicly fired me from the company I built from the ground up. He smirked as he handed my job to her, thinking I would walk away quietly. That afternoon, I interviewed at a rival company. The CEO stared at my resume in shock, picked up his phone, and called his father. Dad, cancel my blind date. I found your daughter-in-law today. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to completely destroy someone who took your hard work for granted. Pack your desk, Meredith. The heavy thud of a manila severance folder hitting the glass conference table echoed like a gunshot through the pristine, sunlight-flooded boardroom. Tristan, the man I had dated for 4 arduous years and built this very company alongside from our cramped apartment living room, did not even have the basic decency to look me in the eye. He leaned back in his custom leather chair, adjusting the cuffs of a tailored suit that I had personally bought for his birthday just 2 months ago. "You are being replaced as Chief Operating Officer," he announced to the 10 silent, highly paid executives seated around us. His voice held a practiced, arrogant cadence that made my stomach churn. "Serena is taking over your role effective immediately. She has the visionary aesthetic PulseTech desperately needs for our new global brand identity. You, Meredith, are much better suited for background clerical work." Serena, Tristan's high school sweetheart, who had recently returned to the city after finalizing a highly publicized divorce from a wealthy real estate developer, offered a sickly sweet, perfectly rehearsed smile from the seat that was supposed to be mine. She slowly crossed her legs, deliberately smoothing the skirt of a vibrant designer dress she had undoubtedly purchased with her massive alimony settlement. "No hard feelings, Meredith," Serena said, her voice dripping with artificial, saccharine sympathy that made my jaw clench. "Tristan and I just feel the company is moving in a much more dynamic, modern direction. You have been absolutely great at typing up the memos and handling the boring administrative tasks, but we need a fresh face for the brand. Besides, you really should invest in a new wardrobe. That gray suit you are wearing looks like it barely survived the previous decade." I did not cry. I did not raise my voice or throw a tantrum. I slowly stood up from my ergonomic chair, placing my hands flat on the cool glass table, and looked directly at the woman who was foolishly attempting to humiliate me in the empire I had constructed. "A new wardrobe might be a nice investment," I said evenly, letting my gaze travel deliberately down to the oversized handbag resting at her feet. "But I would much rather wear a practical, older suit than carry a counterfeit designer bag into a corporate meeting. The stitching on your handles is frayed, Serena, and the hardware stamp is visibly off-center. If you are going to play the part of a wealthy visionary executive, you should really try not to bring cheap street knockoffs into my boardroom." Serena's face flushed a deep, blotchy red. She hastily kicked the bag under the table, her smug, triumphant smile vanishing instantly as a few executives stifled quiet coughs. I turned my undivided attention back to Tristan, who was now staring at me with his jaw tightly clenched, a vein throbbing at his temple. As for my background clerical work, I continued, keeping my tone deadly calm and perfectly measured so every single executive in the room could hear every syllable. "I suppose that clerical work includes paying your personal rent for 3 consecutive years when you were drowning in credit card debt and could not afford groceries. I suppose it also includes writing the entire 60-page pitch deck that secured our initial funding while you were busy trying to figure out how to format a basic spreadsheet." Tristan shifted uncomfortably, but I refused to let him speak. "And let us not forget the 72 straight hours I stayed awake last month." I pushed further, my voice echoing off the glass walls. "I rewrote the entire back-end code for the fitness tracker application because you decided to go on a luxury golf retreat with potential investors and completely ignored a catastrophic system failure that would have bankrupted us." A heavy, suffocating silence blanketed the room. The executives, men and women I had personally recruited, trained, and mentored, stared intently at their digital notepads. Not one of them looked up. Not one of them offered a single word of defense for me. Tristan controlled 51% of the voting shares on paper, and they were all far too terrified of losing their own lucrative salaries to speak the truth. Tristan slammed his hand flat against the glass table, the loud smack making Serena jump. His fragile ego could not handle being systematically exposed in front of his subordinates, especially not in front of the woman he was currently trying to impress with his fake power. "You are entirely out of line," Tristan barked, his voice rising in high-pitched panic. "This is exactly the kind of toxic, emotionally unstable behavior that proves you are completely unfit for corporate leadership. I am calling security." He reached for the sleek desk phone, his fingers trembling slightly as he punched in the numbers. Furthermore, Tristan added, puffing out his chest to regain his posture of absolute authority, "Since you are being terminated for hostile workplace behavior and insubordination, I am officially freezing your 15% equity stake. Our corporate bylaws allow me to hold those shares pending a full legal review. You will not see a single dime of the upcoming product launch revenue. Now get out of my building before I have the guards physically remove you." I looked at the men and women around the table one last time. These were the people I had built a $100 million valuation for, and they were letting me be thrown out like garbage. I slowly picked up my encrypted tablet, the only piece of hardware on the table that actually belonged entirely to me. "You do not have to call security, Tristan," I said, my voice dropping to a low whisper that somehow commanded the entire massive room. "I am leaving. But do me one small favor before you pop the champagne with your new chief operating officer. Make sure you actually read the original operating agreements you eagerly signed 5 years ago. Because your visionary aesthetic is not going to save you when you finally realize what you just threw away." I turned on my heel and walked out of the boardroom. I did not look back. I did not shed a single tear of defeat. I marched straight to my corner office, grabbed an empty cardboard box, and swept exactly 3 things into it: a framed photo of my rescue dog, my personal ergonomic mouse, and my backup encrypted hard drive. Everything else could stay and rot with the company. The midday sun beat down relentlessly on the scorching concrete pavement as I stood outside the PulseTech building, holding the small cardboard box tightly against my chest. The bustling streets of the city moved rapidly around me, completely indifferent to the fact that I had just been brutally stripped of my life's work. Delivery drivers shouted, business people rushed past with their coffees, and traffic hummed in a continuous blur of noise. I set the box down heavily on a nearby metal city bench and pulled out my smartphone to check my messages. A notification popped up immediately on the screen. It was an automated email from a standard mid-tier tech firm I had sent a resume to 3 weeks ago, back when I first sensed Tristan was plotting something sinister with Serena. The email was a cold, generic rejection template. "Thank you for your interest in our company. We have decided to move forward with other candidates whose profiles better match our current operational needs. We wish you the best of luck in your future endeavors." I let out a harsh, utterly humorless laugh. I had built a highly profitable tech empire from absolute scratch, managing hundreds of employees and overseeing massive product launches, and I was getting blindly rejected by entry-level recruiters who probably had not even glanced at my actual accomplishments. But before I could even fully process the bitter irony of the situation, my phone began to vibrate violently in my hand. The caller ID displayed an unknown local number. I answered it cautiously, fully expecting a spam call or a delivery driver looking for the PulseTech loading dock. "Meredith," a sharp, highly professional woman's voice said through the crisp audio of the speaker. "My name is Claire. I am an executive headhunter, retained exclusively by Apex Innovations. We have been keeping a very close eye on your career trajectory at PulseTech for the past 6 months." Apex Innovations. The name alone sent a massive jolt of pure adrenaline straight through my system. They were the multi-billion-dollar conglomerate that completely dominated the global tech industry. They were PulseTech's most massive, ruthless, and heavily funded rival. "I am listening," I said, my posture straightening immediately as the shock of the morning began to melt into a razor-sharp focus. "We received reliable intel from our internal sources that there is a major executive restructuring happening at PulseTech today." Claire continued smoothly, not bothering to hide the terrifying fact that they had high-level corporate spies embedded everywhere in the city. "The chief executive officer of Apex Innovations wants to meet with you directly. Not next week. Not tomorrow morning. Today." Can you be at our downtown headquarters by 2 o'clock this afternoon? I looked down at the pathetic cardboard box, sitting on the dirty metal bench. Inside it, next to my encrypted hard drive, was a cheap plastic pen holder Tristan had given me for our very first anniversary 4 years ago. It was a pathetic, meaningless, thoughtless token from a man who had just stolen my entire future to impress a woman who carried fake designer bags. I will be there in 20 minutes, I replied firmly. I ended the call without waiting for a goodbye. I reached into the box, picked up the backup encrypted hard drive, and slipped it securely into the deep inside pocket of my tailored blazer. Then, without a second thought, I picked up the cardboard box and dropped the entire thing, the photo frame, the mouse, and that ridiculous plastic pen holder, directly into the nearest municipal trash can. The heavy thud it made as it hit the bottom felt like the closing of a miserable chapter. I stepped quickly to the curb and raised my hand, hailing a passing yellow taxi that screeched to a halt in front of me. As I slid into the worn leather back seat, I gave the driver the prestigious address for the Apex Innovations skyscraper. I pulled out my tablet, unlocked it with a furious swipe, and opened a completely blank document. I had exactly a 20-minute ride, and I was absolutely not going to waste a single second of it feeling sorry for myself. I knew exactly what Apex Innovations was currently struggling with. I had studied their market trends obsessively. I knew their third-quarter market strategy had a massive glaring blind spot regarding wearable fitness, artificial intelligence. My fingers flew across the digital keyboard with blistering speed. I drafted a ruthless, hyper-aggressive market takeover strategy. I detailed exactly how Apex could severely undercut PulseTech's highly anticipated upcoming product launch, completely cannibalize their target demographic, and render Tristan's brand new, expensive marketing campaign completely obsolete before it even hit the internet. I poured every ounce of my frustration, my profound betrayal, and my unparalleled insider knowledge into a lethal, comprehensive corporate battle plan. By the time the taxi finally pulled up to the towering glass and steel monolith of the Apex building, I had a fully formed weapon resting in my hands. I paid the driver generously and stepped out, tilting my head back to look at the massive skyscraper that seemed to pierce the clouds. This was the absolute belly of the beast. The grand lobby was a sprawling, intimidating expanse of white marble brushed steel and imposing modern art. Security guards in sharply tailored suits stood watch at the biometric turnstiles, eyeing everyone who entered. I walked straight up to the main reception desk, completely bypassing a long line of nervous-looking applicants waiting for standard human resources interviews. The receptionist looked up, offering a polite but highly dismissive corporate smile. "Do you have a scheduled appointment with human resources?" she asked, her hands hovering over her keyboard. "No," I said, my voice carrying the absolute unyielding authority I had honed over 5 years of managing incompetent executives and arrogant investors. "I am not here for human resources. I am here for the chief executive officer. Tell Declan that Meredith is downstairs." The receptionist blinked rapidly, momentarily losing her practiced, polished smile. "Ma'am, the CEO does not take unannounced meetings under any circumstances. You need to go through the proper channels and submit a formal request. Call his office right now." I insisted, locking eyes with her and refusing to blink. "Tell him the former chief operating officer of PulseTech is standing in his lobby, and I am holding the exact blueprint to absolutely destroy his biggest competitor. He is expecting me." She hesitated, her eyes scanning my resolute expression, then slowly picked up her phone, typing furiously on her computer terminal. After a brief, hushed conversation with someone on the executive floor, her eyes widened in shock. She placed the receiver down and looked at me with profound, newfound respect. "Take the private executive elevator directly to the 52nd floor," she said, handing me a heavy metal temporary access badge. "He is waiting for you right now." I clipped the badge to my blazer and walked purposefully toward the sleek glass elevator. The heavy doors slid open, and as I stepped inside, the bustling city dropped away beneath me. I was no longer the betrayed girlfriend or the discarded co-founder. I was a lethal weapon, and I was about to walk into the office of the most powerful man in the tech industry and hand him the detonator. The elevator doors glided open with silent, heavy precision, revealing the 52nd floor of the Apex Innovations Tower. The executive suite was a masterclass in psychological warfare. Polished obsidian floors stretched toward a towering glass wall overlooking the sprawling cityscape, ensuring anyone who visited understood exactly how small they were. I stepped off the elevator, my heels clicking sharply against the stone, projecting a calm certainty I had spent years mastering. A sharply dressed executive assistant did not ask for my name. He simply straightened his posture and gestured toward a pair of massive frosted glass doors at the end of the hall. He pushed them open, stepping aside to let me enter the lion's den. Declan sat behind a desk carved from a single slab of reclaimed mahogany. At 35, he possessed the kind of ruthless, predatory grace that commanded boardrooms and destroyed competitors before lunch. He did not stand to greet me. He leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers together, his dark eyes analyzing every inch of my demeanor. The silence in the room was deliberate, designed to make me fidget to speak first and surrender my power. I refused to play that game. I walked to the leather guest chair, remained standing, and met his unyielding stare with absolute ice. Meredith Declan began, his voice a low, resonant baritone, carrying no trace of professional warmth. My analysts tell me you are the actual engine keeping PulseTech running. Yet less than an hour ago, security escorted you out of the very building you helped finance. It makes a man wonder. If you are as indispensable as the industry whispers suggest, why is a founder standing in my office looking for a job before the press release has even been drafted? Are you damaged goods? Or did you just lose your edge? He was testing me, probing for a weakness, waiting for an emotional breakdown or the frantic defense of my bruised ego. I did not give him the satisfaction. I did not blink, nor did I break eye contact. I lost my tolerance for staggering incompetence, I replied, my voice perfectly level. Tristan decided the company needed a shiny new hood ornament instead of a functional engine. He wanted a pretty face for the marketing brochures, and he was willing to sacrifice operational stability to get it. That is his fatal error, not mine. Declan raised a single skeptical eyebrow. An intriguing perspective. But right now, you are just a former executive with no leverage standing in the office of your biggest rival. Why should I listen to a single word you have to say? I reached into my blazer, pulled out my encrypted tablet, and unlocked the screen with a practiced motion. I did not hand it to him gently. I tossed the device across the expansive mahogany desk. It slid to a halt exactly an inch from his steepled fingers. Because your current third-quarter market strategy has a massive glaring blind spot, I stated, leaning forward and placing my hands firmly on his desk. Your hardware division is completely ignoring the predictive biometrics integration for your new wearable fitness line. You are planning to launch a premium physical product with a generic, outdated software algorithm. Tristan knows this. He is planning to announce a dynamic artificial intelligence tracking feature next month that will completely cannibalize your target demographic. Declan looked down at the tablet, his expression tightening as he realized I had just identified a highly classified vulnerability in his upcoming flagship product. What you are looking at on that screen. I continued, pressing my advantage is a comprehensive, hyper-aggressive market takeover strategy I drafted during the 20-minute taxi ride to this building. I mapped out exactly how Apex can completely reverse engineer PulseTech's launch schedule. If you implement the structural pivots I highlighted on page 4, Tristan's new marketing campaign will be utterly obsolete before he even gets the chance to buy the domain name. You will not just beat his product to market, you will choke his entire revenue stream. Declan picked up the tablet, his eyes scanning the data with rapid, calculating precision. The heavy silence stretched again, but this time the tension had shifted. He scrolled through the pages, his jaw setting as he digested the lethal efficiency of my battle plan. After a minute, he slowly set the device down and looked up at me. "This is brilliantly ruthless," Declan admitted, a dangerous glint appearing in his eyes. "But it also presents a significant problem for me. If you are willing to completely dismantle your own company and hand over their throat to a rival this fast, why on earth should I trust you? Loyalty is paramount in my corporation. How do I know you will not turn around and do the exact same thing to me?" I held his gaze, my posture perfectly rigid, letting the absolute truth ring through the quiet office. Loyalty is a two-way contract, I said, my words sharp and uncompromising. Tristan breached it an hour ago by handing my sweat equity to his high school fling. He took my financial sacrifices, my sleepless nights, and my intellectual labor, and he threw them away to inflate his own fragile ego. I do not want a severance, I want to bury them. Declan stared at me, the corners of his mouth twitching upward into a predator's smile. He respected the sheer brutality of my answer. He reached across his desk, picking up a freshly printed dossier his executive team compiled during my journey upstairs. It was a thorough background check detailing every financial and legal footprint I had ever made. He flipped past my employment history, past my banking records, and arrived at the final page. His eyes scanned the dense legal text, moving fast until they locked onto a specific entry listed under my personal assets. He stopped breathing for a split second. The silence in the massive executive suite became completely absolute. Declan slowly lowered the printed dossier back onto the surface of his mahogany desk, keeping his right hand resting flat against the white paper. When he finally looked up, the calculating predator I had faced moments ago was gone. In his place sat a man staring at a highly dangerous anomaly. He tapped his index finger against the bottom of the page right next to a string of federal tax identification numbers. Nova IP LLC, he read aloud, his baritone voice dropping a full octave. You are listed as the sole proprietor and 100% equity holder of this specific legal entity. Are you fully aware of what this holding company currently owns, Meredith? I did not break eye contact. I own the base source code for the dynamic tracking algorithm that currently powers 90% of PulseTech's hardware infrastructure, I stated plainly. I own the machine learning architecture they use to predict user fatigue. I own the back-end integration protocols for their mobile application. I own the technological foundation of the company that just escorted me out of their building. Declan leaned forward, resting his elbows on the desk, his dark eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that would have made most executives crumble. A non-disclosure agreement, or non-compete clause, would prohibit you from sharing trade secrets, he said, testing me, pushing to see if I truly understood the legal battlefield I was walking into. If Tristan claims corporate ownership of that code, you are handing me a massive lawsuit that will tie up Apex Innovations in federal court for the next decade. Do you grasp the thermonuclear weapon you dropped into my lap, or did you pull a reckless stunt out of spite? I let out a short, sharp laugh that echoed off the frosted glass walls. I do not do spite, Declan. I do precision strikes. I walked over to his desk and leaned down, bringing my face level with his. Tristan does not own a single line of that code because he could not even qualify for a standard business loan when we started. 5 years ago, he was drowning in 6 figures of consumer debt from failed crypto investments and unpaid luxury car leases. If we had registered the core intellectual property under his name, his creditors would have seized the patents before we even secured our Series A funding. Declan narrowed his eyes, listening intently as I weaponized my own history. So I protected the asset, I continued, my voice hard and uncompromising. I established Nova IP LLC using my clean credit and personal capital. I registered every patent, every algorithm, and every source code under that holding company. Then I drafted a highly specific licensing agreement granting PulseTech the right to use the technology. Tristan was so desperate to play the visionary founder and so arrogant about his own importance that he signed the operational paperwork without reading the fine print. He assumes PulseTech owns the code because it operates inside his servers. He never realized he only holds a revocable license. Declan stared at me, completely motionless, as the magnitude of my revelations settled over the room. You have the legal authority to revoke their software license, he asked, his voice dangerously quiet. At any given moment, I confirmed, standing back up and smoothing the front of my blazer. The license states that Nova IP LLC can revoke usage rights immediately upon a material breach of the operating agreement or the unjust termination of its managing director. Tristan committed both violations an hour ago when he fired me to give my office to his ex-wife. The air in the room practically crackled with electricity. Declan ran a hand over his jaw, processing the catastrophic damage I could inflict on his biggest competitor with a single legal notice. "You did not just build a company," he murmured almost to himself. "You built a kill switch into its foundation. You knew he would eventually betray you." "I am a chief operating officer," I replied flatly. "It is my job to anticipate catastrophic failures and engineer fail-safes to protect my investments. My investment was my time and my intellect. Tristan was just a high-risk liability I had to manage. Now I am managing him out of existence." "What do you want?" Declan asked, dropping all pretense of an interview. "You did not come here just to brag. You want blood." "I want the position of Executive Vice President of Strategic Acquisitions at Apex Innovations," I demanded, my tone leaving absolutely no room for negotiation. "I want full executive authority to integrate my algorithm into your new wearable fitness line. I want a corner office on this floor, and I want Apex Legal Department to draft the cease and desist order that will freeze PulseTech's product launch tomorrow morning. I am going to bankrupt him and do it wearing your company logo." For a long, suspended moment, Declan simply looked at me. The ruthless corporate titan was entirely disarmed by the sheer, unapologetic brutality of my demands. Then a deep, genuine laugh tore from his chest. It was a rich, echoing sound that filled the massive office, bouncing off the obsidian floors. He threw his head back, laughing with the pure thrill of a man who had just struck gold. He reached across his desk and slammed his hand down on the speed dial button of his office phone, hitting the speaker icon. The line rang exactly twice before a gruff voice answered. "Declan, you are interrupting a board meeting," the older man barked. "This better be a crisis." "It is the exact opposite of a crisis," Jonathan Declan said, still grinning as he looked directly into my eyes. "Dad, cancel my blind date with the banking heiress tonight. I found your daughter-in-law today. She just walked into my office holding the noose to hang our biggest competitor." Jonathan's voice crackled through the speakerphone, cutting through the residual echoes of Declan's laughter. "Are you telling me you actually found someone ruthless enough to dismantle PulseTech before I buy them out?" Jonathan asked, his tone laced with predatory amusement. "I found the architect of their entire infrastructure," Declan replied, his eyes never leaving mine. "She is standing in my office, ready to burn them to the ground." "Hire her," Jonathan ordered bluntly. "Whatever she wants, double it. Do not mess this up." The line clicked dead. Declan tossed the phone onto his desk and leaned back, lacing his fingers behind his head. "Well, Meredith," he said smoothly, "it seems you just negotiated yourself an executive vice presidency and a blank check. Welcome to Apex Innovations." Before I could even respond to the staggering reality of my new position, my personal cell phone vibrated violently against the glass surface of the coffee table. The harsh buzzing shattered the triumphant atmosphere in the room. I picked up the device, my eyes scanning the lock screen. The caller ID displayed my mother's name, Barbara. I swiped to open the notification, fully expecting a mundane question about upcoming holiday plans or a complaint about her country club dues. Instead, the text message staring back at me made the blood freeze in my veins. "Get to the house right now." Barbara's message read, the digital words dripping with her trademark condescension. "Tristan is here for dinner. He told your father and me that you became violently unhinged at the office today and had to be dragged out by security. We are absolutely humiliated by your pathetic, unstable behavior. Get over here and apologize to him immediately. He is being incredibly generous and said he might let you stay on as Serena's personal assistant if you show some actual remorse." I stared at the glowing screen. The sheer, unadulterated audacity of the lie was staggering. Tristan had not just stolen my company and handed my job to his ex-wife. He had immediately run to my status-obsessed parents to spin a fabricated narrative, painting himself as the benevolent victim and me as the hysterical, deranged ex-girlfriend. And my parents, who had always valued Tristan's flashy corporate title over my silent, grueling labor, swallowed his lies without a single question. They had always favored my sister Haley and eagerly treated Tristan like the successful son they never had, completely ignoring my foundational contributions. Declan watched the color drain from my face, his sharp instincts immediately detecting the shift in my demeanor. "Who is threatening my newest executive vice president?" he asked, his voice dropping into a dangerously protective register. I handed him the phone. He read the text message, his jaw tightening with every word. When he finished, he tossed the phone back onto the desk with a look of absolute disgust. "This man is not just arrogant," Declan stated flatly. "He is actively suicidal. He fires the sole owner of his intellectual property and then runs to her family to slander her." Declan stood up, adjusting his suit jacket, transforming instantly back into the ruthless corporate warlord. "I will have my entire legal team draft a defamation lawsuit before you even leave this building," he declared, walking toward his office door. "We will bury him in litigation, so deep, he will not be able to afford a bus pass, let alone a lawyer. I will have a federal cease and desist order hand-delivered to your parents' dining room table within the exact hour." "No," I said, my voice cutting through his rapid-fire commands. Declan stopped, turning to look at me with genuine surprise. "I appreciate the arsenal, Declan, but you cannot fix a toxic family dynamic with corporate lawyers." I picked up my phone and slipped it into my blazer pocket. "Tristan wants to play the gracious savior in front of my parents. He wants to watch me crawl into their dining room and beg for a demotion while he drinks my father's expensive scotch. If I send lawyers, I look like the coward he claims I am. I have to face them myself and look them directly in the eye." Declan studied me, his dark eyes analyzing the absolute resolve in my posture. He recognized the profound necessity of the confrontation. It was not just about business anymore. It was about reclaiming my dignity from the people who had consistently minimized my worth my entire life. "You are walking into an ambush," he warned softly. "Your parents have already chosen his side. They will try to manipulate you into signing away your rights just to keep the peace and preserve their precious social standing. The only person in that house who possesses any real intellect is your brother-in-law Jamal, but he might be outnumbered today. I spent 5 years handling hostile investors and navigating aggressive boardrooms," I replied, grabbing my encrypted hard drive. "A toxic dinner party with my parents and a delusional ex-boyfriend is just a minor inconvenience to me. I am going to walk in there, reject his pathetic offer, and formally sever ties with anyone who chooses his fake money over my actual blood." "Fine," Declan conceded, stepping back toward his immense desk. "You handle the family drama your way, but as the newest executive of Apex Innovations, you represent this global company now, and I refuse to let my executives arrive at an ambush looking anything less than absolutely untouchable." He picked up his desk phone and pressed a single button. "Bring the car around to the private executive entrance," he ordered into the receiver. He looked back at me, a sharp, predatory smile returning to his face. "You are not taking a standard taxi to this dinner, Meredith. My personal driver will take you in the Maybach. If Tristan wants to play power games in your parents' dining room, we are going to show him exactly what real unadulterated power looks like." The doors of the Maybach closed with a reassuring thud. I stood on the concrete driveway of my parents' suburban estate, the manicured lawns looking exactly as suffocating as I remembered. I smoothed the lapels of my blazer, feeling the encrypted hard drive securely in my inside pocket. Taking a deep breath, I walked up the brick path and pushed the oak front door open. The immediate sound of clinking crystal and warm laughter drifted down the hallway from the formal dining room. I followed the noise, striking the hardwood floor with measured precision. I stepped into the dining room and the laughter died instantly. Tristan sat at the head of the table, a position my father usually guarded with his life. He was swirling a generous pour of my father's prized single malt scotch, looking entirely too comfortable. My mother Barbara sat to his right, beaming at him like he had just cured a disease. My father Richard occupied the seat to his left, nodding along to whatever arrogant story Tristan had been telling. "Meredith," my mother snapped her tone, shifting immediately to sharp, bitter disappointment. "You are 45 minutes late. Tristan has been gracious enough to take time out of his demanding schedule to deal with your hysterical outburst, and you cannot even show up on time. It is exactly this unprofessional behavior that proves why you are 33 years old without a husband or stable career." I walked to the opposite end of the mahogany table, refusing to take a seat. "I am perfectly stable," I replied, my voice completely devoid of the emotional breakdown they expected. "And I was not the one who threw a fit today. I simply refuse to let a man hand my 5 years of labor to a woman whose only qualification is a finalized divorce settlement. My father slammed his hand down on the table, rattling the china. Do not speak to Tristan that way, Richard barked, his face flushing a deep red. He built PulseTech into a highly lucrative enterprise. He put a roof over your head and gave you a prestigious title you did not earn. Tristan called us this afternoon completely distraught over your violent, unhinged behavior in the boardroom. He said you embarrassed yourself in front of the executive team. You are going to apologize to this man right now. Tristan held up his hand, projecting the fake benevolent aura of a merciful king. Now, Richard, let us not be too harsh on her, Tristan said, his voice dripping with condescension as he took a sip of scotch. I understand Meredith is feeling incredibly insecure right now. Serena is simply a better fit for the global aesthetic we need. But I am not a cruel man. I still care about your family and want to make sure Meredith does not end up destitute now that she is unemployed. Tristan reached into his tailored suit jacket and pulled out a thick, stapled legal document. He slid it across the polished mahogany surface until it stopped right at the edge of the table in front of me. I looked down at the bold printed heading. It was an equity buyout agreement. I know you are holding on to your 15% founder shares. Tristan continued, resting his elbows on the table. But let us be brutally honest here, Meredith. You do not have the financial literacy to manage corporate equity. Without my daily guidance, you are going to go bankrupt within a year. Because I respect your parents, I am offering to buy out your stake right now. I will give you $50,000 cash today. That is more than enough to cover your rent while you look for a clerical job elsewhere. I stared at the document, trying to decide if he was actually this profoundly stupid or just blinded by narcissism. $50,000 for a 15% stake in a company currently valued at over $100 million. He was attempting to steal $15 million of my earned equity, offering me the equivalent of a cheap used car. This is an absolute insult, I stated flatly, refusing to touch the paper. You are attempting to extort me for $15 million. You do not have $15 million, Barbara shrieked, pointing a manicured finger directly at my face. You have nothing. Tristan is throwing you a lifeline because he pities you. You will sign that contract right now, Meredith. If you ruin this relationship with the only successful man who has ever tolerated you, I will absolutely disown you. We will not support a bitter, unemployed spinster who sabotages our connections to high society. My father grabbed a silver pen and shoved it across the table. Sign the paper, Richard commanded, leaving no debate. Stop embarrassing us and take the money before Tristan changes his mind and leaves you with nothing. You owe him this. I looked at the silver pen rolling to a stop against the buyout agreement. I looked at the three people sitting at the other end of the table who actively preferred to see me robbed and humiliated just to maintain proximity to Tristan's fake wealth. I took a deep breath. Before I could speak, the dining room doors swung open. Jamal stepped into the room. My brother-in-law was dressed in a razor-sharp charcoal suit fresh from his downtown Chicago law firm. As an African-American corporate attorney who regularly dismantled fraudulent executives in federal court, Jamal possessed a commanding, authoritative presence that instantly sucked all the oxygen out of the room. He did not ask for permission to enter. He walked straight past my stunned parents, stepped right next to me, and snatched the buyout contract off the table before I could reach for it. Let us see what kind of garbage we are forcing my sister-in-law to sign today, Jamal said, his deep, resonant voice cutting through the tense silence. Jamal picked up the stapled packet with one hand, holding it up to the dining room chandelier, as if examining a counterfeit painting. Haley stepped into the room right behind her husband, crossing her arms and glaring at our parents. She had always been the favorite daughter, the one who married a brilliant corporate attorney and gave them the perfect grandchildren, but tonight she was standing firmly on my side. Tristan immediately dropped his arrogant posture, his eyes darting nervously toward Jamal. This is a private conversation between Meredith and her former employer, Tristan stammered, attempting to sound authoritative but failing miserably. Put the document down, Jamal. You do not know the corporate context here. Jamal did not put the document down. Instead, a low, rumbling laugh erupted from his chest. It started as a quiet chuckle and quickly escalated into a full, booming laugh that echoed sharply off the mahogany walls. He shook his head, flipping to the second page of the buyout agreement. Tristan, my man, Jamal said. I read merger contracts for breakfast that have more validity than this piece of toilet paper. Did you draft this absolute garbage yourself, or did you hire a first-year law student who failed their ethics exam? Tristan slammed his hand on the table, his face turning a dangerous shade of crimson. That is a standard equity buyout agreement, he barked defensively. I am offering her a highly generous exit package before her shares become entirely worthless. Stay out of family business, Jamal. You are just an in-law. This does not concern you. Jamal's smile vanished, instantly replaced by the terrifying cold calculation of a man who commanded federal courtrooms on a daily basis. He tossed the contract back onto the table with a loud, sharp slap. Family business. Jamal repeated, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper. You are sitting at my father-in-law's table attempting to extort my sister-in-law for $15 million, using a document riddled with illegal coercion clauses and predatory valuation manipulation. Clause 4 attempts to waive her right to future litigation under false pretenses. Clause 7 backdates the forfeiture of her equity, constituting blatant corporate fraud. This concerns me highly, Tristan, because I am a senior partner at a firm that destroys arrogant, fraudulent executives exactly like you before my morning coffee. My mother gasped loudly, clutching her pearl necklace as if she had just been physically struck. Jamal, how dare you speak to Tristan that way? Barbara shrieked, her voice trembling with misplaced rage. Tristan is a highly successful chief executive offering Meredith a massive favor after she violently attacked her coworkers today. You are ruining a perfectly good relationship with a wealthy man just to defend a bitter, unemployed woman. Haley stepped forward, placing a protective hand on her husband's arm, while fixing our mother with a look of absolute disgust. The only bitter people in this room are you and Dad. Haley snapped, her tone lethal. Meredith attacked no one. She got fired because Tristan wanted to give her hard-earned title to his ex-wife. Instead of defending your daughter, you actively helped this man rob her blind. Richard stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. Do not speak to your mother like that, Haley, Richard roared, pointing a trembling finger at my sister. We are trying to save Meredith from total bankruptcy. Tristan is offering her $50,000 cash today. She has no job and no prospects. She needs this money to survive. Jamal did not even flinch at my father's yelling. He leaned across the mahogany table, placing his hands flat against the polished wood, looking directly at my parents. Richard, Barbara, Jamal, said, his voice radiating absolute unyielding disgust. You are assisting a fraud over your daughter. You are pressuring her to sign away an asset worth millions for pennies just to keep bragging to your country club friends about knowing a tech executive. If she signed this contract today, you both would be legally complicit in extortion. I could personally ensure you lose this entire suburban estate, paying the legal fees to defend yourselves in federal court. The threat of losing their precious house and their social standing finally pierced through my parents' delusions. Richard slowly lowered his pointing finger, his face draining of color. Barbara looked frantically between Tristan and Jamal, her mouth opening and closing without producing a single sound. Tristan, realizing he was rapidly losing his grip on his willing accomplices, completely lost his temper. He shoved his chair back violently, knocking it over. He completely ignored it, taking a heavy, aggressive step toward Jamal. You think you can walk in here and threaten me? Tristan spat, closing the distance until he was inches away from Jamal's face. You are nothing but a glorified paper pusher. I am the chief executive officer of a $100 million tech company. I own PulseTech. I own the board, and I will make sure Meredith never works in this industry again. Tristan puffed out his chest, raising his hand in a sudden sharp motion designed to physically intimidate my brother-in-law. He desperately wanted to provoke a physical altercation so he could play the victim once again and call the police on Jamal. I did not give him the chance. I stepped around the edge of the mahogany table, moving faster than Tristan could react. I grabbed the crystal goblet of my father's prized vintage red wine sitting right next to Tristan's empty plate. Without a single word of warning, I threw the crimson liquid directly into his face. The red wine splashed violently across Tristan's nose and mouth, soaking instantly into the crisp white collar of his dress shirt and dripping down the lapels of his $5,000 bespoke suit. He gasped in pure shock, wiping the expensive vintage from his eyes as the dark stains ruined his arrogant image. The entire dining room froze. The red wine dripped slowly from the tip of Tristan's nose, staining the pristine white collar of his custom-tailored shirt, a deep, violent crimson. He stood frozen in absolute shock, gasping for air, as the cold liquid soaked into his expensive silk tie. My mother let out a high-pitched shriek, pressing her hands against her cheeks, while my father stared at me as if I had just committed a violent felony in his sacred dining room. I did not step back. I did not apologize. I simply placed the empty crystal goblet back onto the polished mahogany table with a sharp, definitive click. That is for attempting to steal my intellectual property, I stated, my voice radiating a deadly calm that commanded the entire room. And this, I turned my gaze directly toward Richard and Barbara, is for attempting to sell your own daughter to a con artist for the illusion of suburban prestige. Barbara recovered her voice first, her face contorted with outrage. You are a disgrace, Meredith, she screamed, stepping toward me. You will never set foot in this house again. You are entirely cut off from this family until you learn to respect the people who actually provide for you. I looked at the woman who had spent 33 years minimizing my achievements and holding up Tristan's fake corporate title as the gold standard of success. I am not waiting for you to cut me off. Mother, I replied, my tone completely devoid of the hurt she desperately wanted to inflict. I am legally and emotionally severing ties with you right now. If you want to bet your entire retirement fund and your social standing on a man who is currently bleeding his company dry to pay off secret debts, then you go right ahead. But do not ever call me when the banks come to foreclose on this house, because you chose his fake money over my actual blood. I am done being the punching bag for your fragile egos. I turned on my heel and walked toward the grand foyer. Jamal gave my parents one final look of absolute disgust before adjusting his charcoal suit jacket. You both just made the worst financial and personal decision of your entire lives, Jamal said, his deep voice echoing in the silent dining room. I highly suggest you retain a competent bankruptcy lawyer by the end of the fiscal quarter. He turned and followed me out, joining Haley, who gave our parents a sharp shake of her head before linking her arm through mine. We walked out the heavy oak front door, stepping into the cool evening air of the affluent suburban neighborhood. The massive oak trees and manicured lawns felt entirely suffocating, but the moment my shoes hit the concrete driveway, a massive weight lifted off my shoulders. Before we could even reach the end of the brick pathway, the front door slammed open behind us. Tristan charged out onto the porch, his ruined bespoke suit clinging wetly to his chest. His face was a mask of unhinged fury, stripped entirely of the charming executive persona he used to manipulate my parents. You think you can just walk away from me, Tristan roared, his voice echoing down the quiet street, drawing the attention of several wealthy neighbors walking their purebred dogs. You are nothing without PulseTech, Meredith. You are a 33-year-old spinster who just threw away her only chance at survival. I kept walking, refusing to even turn my head, but Tristan sprinted down the driveway, blocking my path to the sidewalk. He pointed a trembling, wine-stained finger directly at my face. I am going to destroy you, he spat venomously. I have already called every major headhunter in the tri-state area. I blacklisted you from every tech firm in this city. I told them you are mentally unstable, violent, and a massive corporate liability. No one will ever hire you. You will not get a single interview. By the end of this month, you will be begging me for a minimum wage clerical job just to avoid getting evicted from your apartment. You are finished in this industry. Jamal stepped effortlessly between us, using his height and broad shoulders to shield me from Tristan's aggressive posturing. You need to step back right now, Tristan. Jamal warned, his tone dropping into a lethal professional register. You are dangerously close to crossing the line into criminal harassment, and I would love nothing more than to have you arrested on my in-laws' manicured lawn. Tristan sneered at my brother-in-law, trying to puff out his chest, but failing to mask his physical intimidation. You cannot protect her, Jamal, Tristan mocked, wiping a drop of wine from his chin. She is a liability. She is going to be homeless in 30 days, and there is absolutely nothing you or her pathetic resume can do to stop it. Right at that exact second, a sleek, impossibly long black Maybach glided silently around the corner of the suburban street. The luxurious vehicle moved like a predator through the quiet neighborhood, its tinted windows and polished chrome details screaming a level of exorbitant wealth that Tristan's heavily financed lifestyle could never even begin to comprehend. The heavy car pulled to a flawless stop right at the edge of the curb, directly next to where we stood. Tristan stopped yelling, his mouth falling slightly open as he stared at the $500,000 vehicle, trying to calculate which billionaire neighbor it belonged to. Declan finally stepped out onto the pavement, carefully adjusting his tailored suit. He walked straight past Tristan, completely ignoring him, and slowly extended a hand toward Jamal with genuine professional respect. Then Declan smoothly opened the heavy rear door for me. "Let us finally get you out of this miserable neighborhood, Executive Vice President," he said. "Your corner office is waiting for you right now at the top of the tower." I slid into the opulent leather interior of the Maybach without giving my parents or Tristan a single backward glance. The heavy door shut, sealing away the suburban toxicity and replacing it with the quiet hum of a massive V12 engine. I slept that night in a luxury hotel suite Declan arranged, completely undisturbed by the desperate, frantic voicemails my mother left trying to justify her terrible betrayal. I woke up at 6 in the morning to a phone vibrating so violently it nearly fell off the nightstand. I picked up the device expecting more pathetic excuses from my parents, but the notification screen told a much darker story. My professional network was exploding. My inbox overflowed with urgent messages from industry colleagues, investors, and tech journalists. I opened my primary professional networking application, and the sheer audacity of the attack made my blood run cold. Serena had wasted absolutely zero time playing the victim. Using PulseTech's official verified corporate account, she had published a massive public statement regarding a recent change in executive leadership. The post was a masterclass in corporate slander. It did not mention my name directly to avoid immediate libel triggers, but the implications were unmistakably clear. PulseTech is committed to maintaining a safe, innovative, and collaborative environment. Serena wrote, her words dripping with fake corporate responsibility. Yesterday, we had to make the difficult decision to sever ties with a former founder who engaged in severe data theft and demonstrated highly hostile, violent workplace behavior. We do not tolerate physical outbursts or intellectual property breaches. PulseTech is moving forward into a dynamic new era. Appended to the post was a subtly blurred photograph of Tristan's wine-stained suit, framed to look like he had survived a vicious, unprovoked assault. The post already had thousands of views and hundreds of shares across the entire tech sector. But the most sickening part was not Serena's cowardly post. It was the top comment pinned directly beneath it. "As her parents, we are profoundly heartbroken and deeply ashamed of her violent actions," Richard and Barbara wrote from their joint verified account, ensuring the entire industry knew exactly who the unnamed founder was. "We stand fully behind Tristan's visionary leadership and apologize to the PulseTech team for her unstable behavior. My own flesh and blood had publicly branded me a violent corporate thief to protect a man who was actively driving his company into the ground. Tristan was making good on his threat to blacklist me." My phone buzzed with automated cancellation emails from 2 boutique headhunting agencies who had seen the post and panicked. Tristan wanted me to panic too. He wanted me to issue a frantic emotional denial that would only make me look more unhinged. He wanted me to play defense. I tossed my phone onto the hotel bed, completely ignoring the urge to draft a response. I did not play defense. I showered, dressed in a flawless tailored charcoal suit, and took a private car directly to the Apex Innovations headquarters. I bypassed the lobby security scanning my new temporary executive access badge and rode the private elevator straight to the 52nd floor. Declan was waiting for me in his massive corner office, a sleek silver pen resting on top of a thick stack of legal documents. "You are trending online for all the wrong reasons this morning." Declan noted his tone, carrying a sharp, predatory amusement rather than concern. "Tristan is attempting to scorch the earth before you can plant any seeds. Are you going to issue a public rebuttal to your parents' highly slanderous comment?" I walked directly to his desk, picking up the heavy silver pen. "A public rebuttal is a waste of characters," I stated firmly, flipping open the contract. "I prefer to respond with market capitalization." I read through the employment contract with rapid precision. "Executive Vice President of Strategic Acquisitions." The compensation package was astronomical, featuring heavy stock options and a massive signing bonus. But the only clause I truly cared about was the operational authority. Declan had granted me absolute unrestricted power to cannibalize PulseTech's market share and integrate my artificial intelligence tracking algorithms into Apex's upcoming wearable fitness line. I signed my name on the dotted line with a smooth, decisive stroke, binding my intellectual property and my corporate future to the most powerful conglomerate in the industry. I am officially an Apex executive, I said, sliding the contract back to him. Let us go to war. Declan smiled, a dangerous, calculating expression that mirrored my own. He stood up, buttoning his suit jacket. The war room is already prepped, he said, gesturing toward the adjoining executive boardroom. Our outside counsel flew in from Chicago on the red-eye specifically for this aggressive acquisition. I walked through the connecting frosted glass doors and stepped into the massive high-tech boardroom. Sitting at the head of the conference table reviewing a towering stack of federal statutes and patent filings was Jamal. My brother-in-law looked up, his sharp eyes locking onto mine with absolute professional solidarity. Tristan made a catastrophic tactical error this morning, Jamal said, his deep voice resonating with lethal authority. By publicly accusing you of data theft, using the official PulseTech platform, he just handed us a slam-dunk commercial slander and defamation lawsuit. But we are not going to lead with that. We are going to hit him where it actually hurts his valuation. Declan took a seat at the table, projecting total executive dominance. Tristan and Serena are hosting a massive press conference at the National Tech Expo tomorrow morning, Declan explained, pulling up a digital blueprint of the event on the main projector screen. They plan to unveil their groundbreaking new fitness tracking feature to investors and the entire global media. They are using your exact architecture to secure a new round of funding to cover his massive secret debts. Jamal slid a heavy, thick legal document across the boardroom table. The cover page bore the imposing seal of a federal court. Tristan thinks he is launching a product tomorrow, Jamal said, a cold, predatory smile spreading across his face. He has absolutely no idea he is walking straight into a federal ambush. This is a massive cease and desist order for intellectual property theft. We are going to serve it to him live on camera in front of every major investor in the country. I looked down at the federal injunction, the ultimate legal guillotine, hovering directly over Tristan's fragile neck. My parents thought they had destroyed my reputation this morning to protect their golden boy. They had absolutely no idea they had just bought front-row tickets to his complete and utter corporate execution today. The National Tech Expo was a sprawling, chaotic arena of flashing cameras, blinding spotlights, and cutthroat corporate ambition. Thousands of journalists, investors, and tech enthusiasts packed the convention center floor, buzzing with anticipation for the industry's most highly awaited announcements. Tristan had spared absolutely no expense for PulseTech's presentation. He had rented the largest center stage, constructing a massive high-definition display that projected the PulseTech logo in vibrant, aggressive colors. The sheer scale of the display was a testament to his desperate need for validation. I walked into the main exhibition hall, flanked by Declan and Jamal. The three of us moved with the synchronized precision of an apex predator closing in on its target. Declan wore a bespoke midnight blue suit that commanded instant deference from the surrounding crowd, while Jamal carried an imposing leather briefcase that held the instrument of Tristan's imminent destruction. We took our position near the back of the massive crowd, gathering around the PulseTech stage. Up on the brilliantly lit platform, Tristan and Serena were putting on a sickeningly polished performance. Serena wore a vibrant red designer dress, clearly purchased with the corporate funds she had zero right to access. She held a sleek microphone, smiling radiantly at the sea of journalists. Tristan stood beside her, looking every inch the visionary founder he pretended to be. He confidently clicked a remote control, bringing up a complex digital wireframe of the dynamic artificial intelligence fitness tracking algorithm. The exact algorithm I had spent 3 grueling years coding, testing, and perfecting, while he was busy racking up secret consumer debt. We are thrilled to unveil the future of biometric integration, Serena announced, her voice echoing through the massive convention hall. PulseTech is no longer just a hardware company. We are a lifestyle evolution. Our newly developed proprietary algorithm will predict user fatigue before it even happens seamlessly, adapting to your physiological needs in real time. We built this from the ground up because we refuse to let outdated legacy systems hold back human potential. The journalists furiously tapped away on their tablets, completely unaware that they were documenting a massive federal crime. Tristan beamed, stepping up to the edge of the stage to bask in the blinding flashes of the cameras. This innovation proves that when you trim the dead weight from a company, you can finally soar, he declared, puffing his chest out. He was practically vibrating with arrogance. That was the exact moment Serena scanned the crowd and locked eyes with me. Her triumphant smile faltered for a fraction of a second, but her desperate need for public validation quickly overrode her basic common sense. She gripped the microphone tighter, leaning forward with a malicious predatory gleam in her eye. She saw an opportunity to cement her new executive status by publicly humiliating the woman she had replaced. She completely ignored the golden rule of public relations and went entirely off script. "Speaking of dead weight," Serena said, her voice ringing out across the silent exhibition hall, "it seems we have a very special guest in the audience today. Everyone, please direct your attention to the back of the room. We are honored to be joined by our former Chief Operating Officer, Meredith." Hundreds of heads whipped around instantly. The cameras swiveled away from the stage, their bright lenses focusing directly on me. Declan stood perfectly still beside me, radiating an intimidating aura of absolute power, while Jamal simply adjusted his grip on his heavy leather briefcase. Serena continued, her voice dripping with artificial toxic pity. "Meredith, we are so glad you could scrape together the courage to show up today." Serena projected over the sound system, ensuring every single investor heard her. "We know how difficult it must be for you to witness PulseTech thriving without you. Change is terrifying, and we understand why you struggled to keep up with our fast-paced, innovative vision. It is completely natural for a disgruntled former employee to feel bitter when they are replaced by superior talent. But we truly hope you can find peace and perhaps a clerical position that better suits your limited capabilities." A low murmur rippled through the massive crowd of journalists. Tristan smirked, crossing his arms over his chest, thoroughly enjoying the public execution his new partner was attempting to orchestrate. He actually thought he had won. He actually believed his ridiculous smear campaign had broken my spirit. I did not break. I did not flush with embarrassment or lower my head. I stood perfectly tall, letting the flashing cameras capture the absolute, unyielding calm on my face. I took a slow, deliberate step forward, separating myself from the crowd. The journalists parted like the Red Sea, giving me a clear, unobstructed path directly to the front of the stage. I looked up at Serena and Tristan, my expression radiating nothing but pure clinical execution. "I am not here to look for a clerical position, Serena," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the silent hall without needing a microphone. "I am here to conduct a very necessary audit of my personal property. You just presented a highly sophisticated artificial intelligence tracking algorithm to a room full of global investors. You claimed PulseTech built it from the ground up. You claimed it is your proprietary software." Tristan scoffed, grabbing a microphone from an assistant. "It is our software, Meredith. Stop embarrassing yourself. You are making a pathetic scene because you cannot handle the fact that we improved upon your clunky, outdated base code. Security needs to escort this woman out before she becomes violent again." I smiled, a sharp, lethal smile that made Tristan's confident posture fracture. I did not yell. I simply turned my head slightly and gestured to my right. Jamal stepped out from the crowd, moving with the terrifying, undeniable authority of a top-tier corporate attorney. He walked straight up to the edge of the stage, bypassing the confused security guards who were entirely too intimidated by his presence to intervene. Jamal unclasped his leather briefcase and pulled out a thick, imposing stack of legal documents. Bound to the very front page was the unmistakable heavy gold seal of a federal court judge. Tristan looked down at the documents, his arrogant smirk finally sliding completely off his face. Jamal held the massive legal packet up high for every single flashing camera in the room to capture. Jamal stepped fully onto the elevated platform, his presence instantly dominating the space. The harsh stage lights reflected off the heavy gold seal of the federal court order in his hand. he did not hesitate or wait for permission to approach the podium. He walked directly up to Tristan and slammed the thick stack of legal documents onto the sleek glass surface right next to the presentation remote. The loud smack echoed through the sound system, causing the front row of journalists to physically jump. "You have been officially served." Tristan Jamal announced, his deep voice carrying an undeniable weight of authority that cut through the murmur of the massive crowd. Serena lunged forward, her face twisting into a mask of pure panic and rage. "Security!" She shrieked into her microphone, pointing a trembling finger at my brother-in-law. "Remove this man immediately. He is trespassing on our rented stage." Jamal did not even glance in her direction. He smoothly reached over and turned off her microphone with a swift, decisive click. "I am a licensed corporate attorney executing a federal mandate," Jamal stated, projecting his voice so clearly that the entire hall fell deathly silent. "Any security guard who places a hand on me will be personally named in a federal civil rights and obstruction lawsuit before the end of the business day." The two guards who had started to approach the stage instantly froze in their tracks, exchanging nervous glances before backing away entirely. Jamal turned his attention back to the sea of flashing cameras and wide-eyed investors. He picked up the microphone Tristan had been holding. "The dynamic tracking algorithm Mr. Tristan is presenting to you today is the sole intellectual property of Nova IP LLC," Jamal declared, his words ringing out like a death knell across the convention center. "My client holds the exclusive federal patents and the registered source code. Mr. Tristan has absolutely no legal ownership of this technology. Therefore, any commercialization, distribution, or investment in this specific product constitutes federal theft and corporate fraud. We have secured a federal cease and desist order halting all operations effective immediately." The exhibition hall erupted into absolute chaos. Journalists began shouting questions, talking over each other in a desperate bid to get a quote. Investors who were moments ago ready to write massive checks suddenly stared at Tristan with intense suspicion and mounting anger. Tristan grabbed the backup microphone from the podium, his face flushed a dark, dangerous red. He let out a loud, forced laugh, trying desperately to project the image of an unbothered visionary leader. "Ladies and gentlemen, please calm down," Tristan said, his voice tight with barely concealed panic. "This is nothing more than a pathetic publicity stunt orchestrated by a disgruntled former employee and her relative. PulseTech is a multi-million-dollar enterprise. We built this code in-house. We own every single line of this algorithm. My legal team will have this ridiculous injunction thrown out of court by tomorrow morning. Do not let a bitter ex-girlfriend distract you from the future of fitness technology." He actually thought he could charm his way out of a federal mandate. He actually believed his own arrogant lies. I did not wait for Jamal to dismantle his weak defense. I walked up the short flight of stairs to the stage, my heels clicking against the metal grating. Declan remained standing at the bottom of the stairs, a silent, towering guardian, ensuring no one dared to interfere with my execution of the man who had tried to ruin my life. I stepped up to the podium and looked directly at Serena, who was shrinking back, her fake confidence entirely shattered. "You wanted me to find a position that suited my limited capabilities, Serena," I said, my voice cold and uncompromising. "I think dismantling your stolen empire suits me perfectly." I turned my full attention to Tristan. He was sweating now, tiny beads of moisture collecting on his forehead under the hot stage lights. He tried to maintain his defiant glare, but his hands were gripping the edges of the podium so tightly, his knuckles had turned completely white. "You are bluffing, Meredith," Tristan hissed, leaning in so the microphones would not pick up his voice. "You cannot patent code that was developed on company servers. I own PulseTech, and PulseTech owns everything you ever created while you were on my payroll. I will crush you in federal court. I will take every single thing you own." I reached out and pulled the microphone directly toward me, ensuring every single person in the massive exhibition hall heard my final devastating blow. The investors in the front row leaned in, hanging on my every word. "Check your capitalization table." "Tristan," I commanded, my voice echoing with absolute undeniable power. "PulseTech does not own a single line of that code. PulseTech holds a revocable license to use that code. 5 years ago, when you were drowning in secret consumer debt and could not legally pass a basic credit check to file a patent, I structured the holding company myself. Nova IP LLC is 100% owned by me. You never read the operating agreements you eagerly signed because you were too busy pretending to be a self-made genius. The color completely drained from Tristan's face. His mouth opened, but no sound came out as the catastrophic reality of his own sheer incompetence finally crashed down on him. I leaned closer, looking dead into his terrified eyes. The terms of that specific software license explicitly state that I can revoke your usage rights immediately upon your material breach of contract. I continued watching his entire world crumble under the bright lights. You breached that operational contract yesterday when you fired the sole owner of your intellectual property to eagerly give her office to your high school fling. You completely underestimated my strategic foresight. I am officially revoking your software license right here, right now. You have absolutely no product left to sell to these angry investors standing here today. You have nothing. The doors to the PulseTech executive boardroom slammed shut. Tristan hurled his suit jacket across the room, knocking over a crystal water pitcher that shattered against the floor. He stormed directly to the filing cabinets that housed the corporate archives. He ripped through manila folders, throwing marketing brochures and expense reports over his shoulder. His hands were shaking uncontrollably until he found the original operating agreements from their seed funding round. He threw the heavy stack of legal documents onto the glass table, tearing through the pages. There it was, buried deep within Clause 7 of the Intellectual Property Assignment. He read the dense legal jargon, the very text he had dismissed as boring clerical work half a decade ago when he was desperately dodging collection calls from credit card companies. The document clearly outlined that Nova IP LLC retained absolute ownership of the core source code granting PulseTech, a strictly revocable license contingent upon Meredith remaining the active managing director. He had signed his name on the dotted line. He had handed her the operational kill switch because his ego was too massive to read a 30-page contract. Serena paced the length of the boardroom, her vibrant red designer dress now looking like a ridiculous costume. She grabbed the edge of the glass table, her knuckles turning completely white. "Tell me you can fix this disaster!" Serena shrieked, her voice shrill and echoing off the frosted glass walls. "Tell me that smug woman is lying about the patents." Tristan did not answer her. He just stared in mute horror at his own signature on the legal document. Serena let out a sound of pure panic, realizing she had tied her fate to a sinking ship. "I finalized my divorce settlement last month to join your executive team," she screamed, stepping closer and pointing an accusing finger directly at his face. "I walked away from a massive guaranteed alimony payout because you promised me an untouchable empire and a highly lucrative initial public offering. You told me you owned this groundbreaking technology. You told me Meredith was just a glorified secretary you kept around out of pity because she was obsessed with you. If this federal injunction holds, this company is utterly worthless. I am not going down in flames with a bankrupt loser." Before Tristan could even attempt to pacify her rising hysteria, the heavy boardroom doors swung open again. The 10 senior executives who had blindly supported Tristan during Meredith's termination filed into the room. Their faces were completely ashen, stripped of their usual corporate arrogance. The lead investor, a man who had openly laughed at Meredith's gray suit just yesterday, slammed both his hands violently onto the conference table. "The financial market analysts are already catching wind of the catastrophic scene at the Tech Expo," he barked, his voice laced with pure, unfiltered venom. "Our outside legal counsel just reviewed the documents and confirmed the federal cease and desist order is entirely legitimate. Our stock price is going to absolutely crater into nothing the second the market opens tomorrow morning. You lied to the board, Tristan. You presented a core asset you did not legally own. You committed gross negligence. We are demanding your immediate resignation and a full public apology to Meredith before she bankrupts every single one of us and drags us into federal court." Tristan looked at the circle of wealthy executives who had eagerly praised his visionary leadership a mere 24 hours ago. They were turning on him instantly, acting like cornered rats, ready to throw him to the wolves just to save their own lucrative stock options and severance packages. His breathing grew dangerously shallow, cold panic clawing at his throat, but his staggering, blinding narcissism absolutely refused to accept defeat. He was Tristan, the brilliant, charismatic founder. I was not going to let a woman he had discarded take his wealth and humiliate him on a global stage while his peers watched. I am not resigning. Tristan growled, his voice dropping into a dangerous manic register that silenced the boardroom. And I am absolutely not apologizing to that bitter, vindictive woman. We do not need her stolen code. We just need a rapid exit strategy. The executive stared at him like he had completely lost his mind. You cannot legally sell a product you do not own, the lead investor argued, throwing his hands up in sheer disbelief. We are dead in the water. We are not selling a product. Tristan countered, a dark, desperate calculation forming in his eyes. We are selling the entire company. He walked quickly over to the whiteboard, grabbing a dry erase marker and drawing a crude organizational chart. I have been in secret back-channel talks with Vanguard Global, a highly aggressive offshore foreign investment fund. They have been absolutely desperate to acquire an American tech firm to establish an immediate operational footprint in this country. They want a rapid cash-out merger, and they want the paperwork signed immediately. The lead investor scoffed loudly, shaking his head in disgust. No institutional buyer on earth will touch our portfolio with a massive federal injunction currently hanging over our heads. Tristan smiled, a cold, reckless smile that bordered on pure insanity. They do not know about the federal injunction yet. Vanguard operates exclusively out of international waters. Their corporate due diligence is notoriously fast and incredibly sloppy. If we expedite the merger agreement tonight, we can finalize the entire acquisition and cash out all our shares before the federal court order officially becomes public record tomorrow morning. I will personally pledge my own equity to guarantee the intellectual property is unencumbered. By the time Vanguard realizes the source code actually belongs to Nova IP LLC, the cash will already be sitting safely in our untraceable offshore accounts, and Meredith can spend the next 10 years fighting a massive foreign conglomerate in international court. We take their cash tonight, and we walk away completely untouchable. While Tristan frantically drafted his illegal merger documents in the PulseTech boardroom, Serena was already executing her own ruthless exit strategy. She slipped out of the convention center through a side door, abandoning her newly acquired Chief Operating Officer title the exact second she realized it was attached to a sinking ship. Serena had not walked away from a highly lucrative divorce settlement just to attach herself to a bankrupt fraud. She flagged down a town car and gave the driver the address for the Apex Innovations Tower. She smoothed her vibrant red dress, reapplied her expensive lipstick, and calculated her next betrayal. Serena strutted into the towering glass lobby of the Apex building, projecting the absolute manufactured confidence of a woman who believed her physical appearance could bypass any corporate protocol. She marched straight to the massive reception desk and flashed her premium access badge from the Tech Expo. She demanded an immediate audience with Declan, claiming she possessed highly classified insider information regarding PulseTech's impending financial collapse. The receptionist hesitated, but contacted the executive floor. Up in the 52nd floor executive suite, Declan received the security notification. A slow, dangerous smile spread across his face. He pressed a button on his desk console to unlock the private elevator, granting Serena direct access to his domain. The heavy oak doors to the executive office swung open. Serena stepped inside, moving with a deliberate, swaying gait designed to capture maximum attention. She scanned the massive office, taking in the reclaimed mahogany desk and the panoramic views of the city. Declan sat casually in his leather chair, radiating wealth and unyielding power. How was everything Tristan pretended to be, but possessed the actual multi-billion-dollar portfolio to back it up. Serena closed the doors behind her and let out a soft, practiced sigh of relief. Declan, she began, her voice dropping into a husky, intimate register. I appreciate you making time for me. I know my arrival is highly unorthodox, but desperate times call for pragmatic solutions. She walked slowly toward his desk, leaning forward to maximize the plunge of her neckline. I am a woman who appreciates real power. I watched you at the expo today. You completely outmaneuvered Tristan, and I have to admit it was incredibly intoxicating to witness. Declan did not offer her a seat. He simply folded his hands on his desk, his expression completely unreadable. You walked away from your own press conference to come to my office, Serena. What exactly is the pragmatic solution you are pitching today? Serena let out a sharp, cruel laugh. PulseTech is a dead entity, she stated bluntly entirely, throwing the man she had just kissed on stage under the bus. Tristan is a financially illiterate man-child who cannot even read a basic operating agreement. He spent the last 5 years taking credit for intellectual property he never actually owned. He is panicking right now, trying to secure a fraudulent merger to save his own skin. He is a pathetic coward, and I refuse to let his staggering incompetence destroy my career trajectory. She leaned closer, resting her manicured hands on the edge of Declan's pristine desk. But Tristan still holds highly valuable physical assets, Serena continued, her eyes gleaming with opportunistic greed. He has the entire international client database. He has the proprietary hardware blueprints. He has the encrypted internal communications of every board member who just tried to oust him. I can copy every single file onto a secure server and hand it directly to you by midnight. I can give you the exact tools to absorb PulseTech's remaining market share for absolutely nothing. Declan raised a single dark eyebrow. And what exactly do you want in exchange for committing corporate espionage against the man you currently share a bed with? Serena smiled, a hungry, predatory expression. I want a corner office on this floor. I want the title of Vice President of Marketing at Apex Innovations. And perhaps she lowered her voice, trailing a finger along the mahogany surface. We could discuss my compensation package over dinner tonight. Tristan was just a stepping stone. You and I could dominate this industry together. Declan stared at her, listening to the sheer, unadulterated treachery spilling from her mouth. He let out a low, rich laugh that echoed sharply off the frosted glass walls. He shook his head slowly, leaning back in his executive chair. You are offering to steal worthless hardware blueprints to a company that I am about to acquire for $0 tomorrow morning, he said, his voice dripping with pure clinical amusement. You think your stolen client lists hold any value when the clients themselves are already calling my switchboard begging to jump ship. You are attempting to negotiate from a position of absolute poverty while demanding a corner office. Serena faltered, her seductive smile freezing on her face. You need an inside operative to ensure a smooth transition, she argued, her tone gaining a frantic edge. I know how Tristan operates. I know his weaknesses. I already know his weaknesses, Declan countered coldly. I have the architect of his entire infrastructure sitting directly on my payroll. Serena scoffed, waving a dismissive hand. You mean Meredith? Please. She is a bitter, hostile woman who got lucky with a single algorithm. She has no vision. She has no aesthetic presence. You cannot put a woman who wears discount suits in charge of a global technology brand. You need someone with real refinement to represent Apex. Declan did not argue. He simply reached across his desk and pressed a silver button on his console. The massive wall of frosted glass separating his office from the adjoining executive conference room instantly turned completely transparent. The smart glass cleared in a fraction of a second, revealing the space right next door. Serena gasped, stumbling backward, her high heels catching on the obsidian floor. I sat in the conference room, perfectly framed by the now clear glass. I wore a brand new bespoke charcoal blazer, a sharp contrast to the discounted clothes I used to wear when I was paying Tristan's overdue rent. A cup of artisan coffee rested next to my tablet. I had heard every single word of her pathetic, treacherous pitch through the integrated intercom system. I picked up my coffee cup and took a slow, deliberate sip, staring right through the glass at the woman who had tried to steal my life. Declan stood up, buttoning his tailored suit jacket. He walked around his desk until he stood directly in front of the horrified, trembling woman. My fiancé handles all executive hires, Serena, Declan stated, his voice echoing with absolute, unquestionable authority. The title was a brilliant, calculated lie, designed to inflict maximum psychological damage and assert total dominance. Would you care to repeat your pitch to her directly? Serena stared at me through the glass, her face drained of all color. She looked from me to Declan, realizing in one shattering moment that she had just confessed to planned corporate espionage in front of the two people who held the power to destroy her entirely. She had no leverage. She had no dignity. She was nothing but a treacherous punchline in a war she was severely unequipped to fight. Without saying a single word, Serena spun around on her designer heels. She practically sprinted toward the heavy oak doors, ripping them open and fleeing down the hallway in absolute terror. I set my coffee cup down on the table, my eyes meeting Declan's through the clear glass wall. We had just stripped Tristan of his only remaining ally. Now it was time to let him hang himself with his own illegal merger. I was signing his own corporate death warrant tonight without realizing it. The morning after, Serena fled Apex Innovations. The financial sector woke up to a seismic shockwave. Major financial news outlets broadcast the breaking story across every monitor in the city. PulseTech's highly anticipated product launch was officially dead. The federal cease and desist order filed by Nova IP LLC had frozen their entire operational infrastructure. Investors who had been eager to throw capital at Tristan just 24 hours ago were now desperately pulling their term sheets. The private valuation of PulseTech plummeted into a catastrophic freefall, hitting absolute zero before the stock market even opened. I sat in my spacious luxury condominium, sipping a fresh espresso, while watching the ticker tape scroll across the television screen. My phone had been dead silent from Tristan, which meant he was already executing his fraudulent exit strategy with Vanguard Global, just as Jamal had predicted. But my phone was not entirely quiet. The lobby concierge called through the secure intercom system. My parents had somehow bypassed the outer security gates and were currently causing a massive scene in the marble foyer. They were demanding immediate access to my private residence. I set my espresso cup down very firmly, smoothing the front of my tailored trousers. I took the private elevator down to the ground floor. I had absolutely no intention of letting them contaminate my personal sanctuary, but I also refused to hide from the mess they had created for themselves. The elevator doors slid open to reveal a scene of sheer pathetic desperation. Richard and Barbara stood in the center of the expansive marble lobby, completely stripped of the arrogant suburban prestige they had flaunted at their dining room table just days ago. My mother tightly clutched a crumpled manila envelope, her face bright red from crying. My father looked physically ill. His shoulders slumped as he argued frantically with the stoic security guards who were blocking their path to the elevators. When Barbara spotted me stepping out of the elevator, she let out a loud, dramatic sob and lunged forward. The security guards immediately stepped in her way, but I raised a hand signaling them to let her approach. Meredith, she wailed, her voice echoing off the high ceilings and drawing the attention of wealthy residents passing through the lobby. Thank God you came down. You have to stop this immediately. You simply must help us. You have to call your lawyers and drop this ridiculous lawsuit against Tristan right now, she shrieked, grabbing at the air between us. We are going to lose everything. I stood perfectly still, crossing my arms over my chest. I am not dropping a federal intellectual property lawsuit because you feel inconvenienced, Mother. I stated, my voice perfectly level. Tristan attempted to commercialize my stolen assets. He is facing the legal consequences of his own staggering incompetence. This has absolutely nothing to do with you. It has absolutely everything to do with us, Richard yelled, pushing past my sobbing mother. He shoved the crumpled manila envelope directly into my hands. Look at this, Meredith. Look at what you are doing to your own family. I opened the envelope and scanned the financial documents inside. My eyes quickly digested the banking headers and the loan origination dates. It took me exactly 5 seconds to understand the absolute catastrophic magnitude of their financial stupidity. You took out a second mortgage on your estate, I asked, looking up at my father with clinical disbelief. You leveraged the entire equity of your home to inject a massive cash investment into his failing tech company. You gave that cash to PulseTech just hours after I was fired. We did it to support the company, Barbara cried, grabbing my arm with desperate fingers. Tristan promised a guaranteed triple return on our investment after the global product launch. He showed us the financial projections. He said the artificial intelligence tracking feature was going to make us wealthy enough to retire in the Hamptons. We trusted him completely. And now the bank is calling our loans because the collateral is tied to a company you just bankrupted. If you do not lift that injunction today, we are ruined. If you do not lift that federal injunction today, the bank will foreclose on our house by the end of the month. You are making your own parents homeless. I smoothly pulled my arm out of her frantic grip, taking a deliberate step back to establish a hard physical boundary. I did not make you homeless. I coldly corrected her, my tone entirely devoid of sympathy. You did not invest that money to support my company. You invested that money 3 days ago, right after Tristan publicly fired me. You saw an incredible opportunity to profit off my painful termination. You gleefully signed away the roof over your head to a con artist because he promised you a quick payout and a flashy country club anecdote. You chose his fake visionary status over my actual blood and sweat. Richard pointed a shaking finger at my face, his anger masking his profound terror. You are a spiteful, ungrateful child, he snarled. We raised you. We provided for you. You owe us this absolute protection. You have an executive salary at Apex Innovations now. You can easily afford to cover our mortgage or drop the lawsuit to let Tristan pay us back. You have to fix this mess, Meredith. I looked at the two people who had publicly slandered my name on social media to protect the very man who was currently robbing them blind. I looked at the parents who demanded I surrender $15 million of my own equity just to keep the peace at their dinner table. I did not owe them a dime. You bet your home on a man who humiliated me. I delivered the final devastating reality check. I will not save you from your own greed. I turned my back as security escorted them out. While my parents were thrown out of my lobby, Tristan dug his grave across the city. He rented a discreet hotel suite to hide from the media circus outside PulseTech. The room smelled of stale coffee and desperation. Sitting across from him were two Vanguard global representatives projecting the exact image of shadowy offshore wealth Tristan desperately needed. Between them rested the expedited merger agreement. It was a massive document designed to bypass corporate due diligence in exchange for rapid cash. Tristan stared at the paperwork with bloodshot eyes. He had not slept since the Tech Expo. He just needed the wire transfer to hit his offshore accounts, and he could vanish, leaving the crumbling shell of his company and his furious investors behind. Before Tristan could reach for the pen, the heavy doors burst open. His lead corporate counsel stormed into the room, his face pale and slick with sweat. He practically threw himself between Tristan and the Vanguard representatives. "You cannot sign that contract," the lawyer hissed, his voice cracking with sheer panic. "The federal cease and desist order is active. The court's officially frozen every asset tied to the artificial intelligence tracking algorithm. If you sign a merger agreement claiming you own that intellectual property free and clear, you are committing blatant securities fraud." Tristan glared at his former lawyer with utter contempt. How was a man backed into a corner completely blinded by his own staggering arrogance? "Vanguard Global operates out of international waters," Tristan argued, lowering his voice to an aggressive whisper. "Their corporate structure is entirely insulated from domestic court injunctions. By the time any federal judge tries to enforce Meredith's ridiculous lawsuit overseas, the acquisition funds will already be secured in my personal accounts. I am not going down with this ship just because you are afraid of some paperwork." The lawyer grabbed Tristan's arm, his fingers digging into the expensive fabric of his suit. "You are not listening to me," the lawyer pleaded desperately. "Look at the collateral clauses in this specific agreement. Vanguard is offering a hyper-expedited cash buyout, but they are requiring you to personally underwrite the entire technological portfolio. If you check the box affirming that PulseTech holds unencumbered ownership of the source code, you are legally binding your own personal equity to this merger. You are pledging your founders' shares, your bank accounts, and your personal properties as collateral. If this blows up, they will not just sue the company, they will pierce the corporate veil and take everything you own." Tristan violently yanked his arm out of the lawyer's grip. "You are fired," Tristan snarled, his eyes wide and manic. "Get out of this suite before I have you thrown out. I built this company from nothing, and I will be damned if I let a bitter ex-girlfriend and a cowardly legal team strip me of my wealth. Get out now." The lawyer stared at Tristan in absolute disbelief, realizing he was watching a man willingly jump off a cliff. He shook his head in disgust, grabbed his briefcase, and walked out the door without looking back. Tristan smoothed his tie, forcing a charming, confident smile back onto his face as he turned to the Vanguard Global representatives. "You must excuse the dramatic interruption," Tristan said smoothly, projecting the false aura of an untouchable chief executive. "My former legal team simply lacked the visionary appetite required for international acquisitions. Shall we proceed with the execution of the merger?" The lead Vanguard representative did not return the smile. He simply slid the leather binder closer to Tristan and tapped a manicured finger next to a highly specific checkbox on the final page. We are prepared to authorize the immediate transfer of funds, the representative stated, his tone completely flat and clinical. However, we require your explicit legal confirmation. By checking this box and applying your signature, you are personally guaranteeing that PulseTech holds absolute uncontested ownership of the core source code and all associated patents. You are putting your entire personal equity on the line to secure this acquisition. Do we have an agreement? Tristan looked at the checkbox. He thought about Meredith standing on the expo stage, humiliating him in front of the entire industry. He thought about his furious board of directors demanding his resignation. He thought about the millions of dollars Vanguard was offering, a golden parachute that would allow him to escape his secret debts and live like a king overseas. I did not care about the legal risks. He only cared about the immediate payout. He was absolutely certain he was outsmarting everyone. Tristan picked up the pen. He firmly checked the box, affirming he owned the intellectual property free and clear. Then he signed his name on the dotted line with a rapid, aggressive flourish. He pushed the binder back across the table, leaning back in his chair with a triumphant, arrogant smirk. The Vanguard representative carefully reviewed the signature. He closed the leather binder with a sharp, definitive snap. The execution is complete, the representative said, sliding the binder into his briefcase. We will see you at the industry gala tomorrow night to publicly announce the acquisition. Hundreds of miles away, in a towering high-rise office building overlooking the sprawling skyline of downtown Chicago, Jamal sat behind his expansive desk. The office was quiet, the city lights reflecting off the polished glass windows. His computer screen suddenly illuminated the dark room, a secure encrypted notification popping up on his private monitor. Jamal leaned forward, his sharp eyes scanning the incoming digital data file. The digital signature matched perfectly. The collateral pledges were fully locked into the system. The trap had been flawlessly executed. A slow, lethal smile spread across his face as he picked up his cell phone and hit my speed dial number. I answered his call standing in my condo. He signed the poison pill, Jamal said. I let out a slow, steady breath, watching the city lights glitter outside my condo window. The trap was officially locked. Tristan had just handed me the absolute keys to his own execution. I thanked Jamal for the update and ended the call, my mind instantly shifting to the final battlefield. Tomorrow night at the National Business Innovators Gala, we would drop the blade and watch the corporate fallout. The following evening, the grand ballroom of the Metropolitan Convention Center was completely transformed into a glittering arena of extreme wealth and cutthroat corporate warfare. Massive crystal chandeliers cast golden light over the tech industry elite. Tristan and Serena arrived aggressively early, desperate to control the narrative before the whispers of the federal injunction could permanently destroy their social capital. Tristan wore a brand new tuxedo clearly bought on credit, masking the sheer blinding panic radiating off his rigid posture. Serena clung tightly to his arm in a silver designer gown, working the room with frantic, desperate energy. They immediately headed for the crowded champagne bar, cornering influential venture capitalists and industry journalists to spin their web of lies. Tristan held up a crystal flute projecting the false, booming laugh of an untouchable founder. He aggressively told anyone who would listen that PulseTech had just secured massive international backing from Vanguard Global. He waved off my federal cease and desist order as a pathetic, desperate stunt, orchestrated by a bitter ex-girlfriend who simply could not handle being replaced by a superior executive. He promised the greedy investors that his offshore merger was a masterclass in global expansion, explicitly denying any intellectual property risks. Serena eagerly joined the character assassination, leaning in close to gossip with the wives of major shareholders and prominent tech bloggers who thrived on drama. Serena purposefully lowered her voice, spreading venomous, fabricated rumors that I was mentally unstable and violently obsessed with Tristan. She boldly claimed my sudden hiring at Apex Innovations was not based on any actual merit or engineering skill, but on trading highly inappropriate sexual favors. She aggressively whispered that I had slept my way into the executive suite, seducing the CEO because I possessed absolutely no real technical capabilities. She laughed loudly, claiming the federal lawsuit would be completely thrown out of court by Monday morning, and I would be left utterly destitute and blacklisted from the entire industry forever. The malicious whispers spread like wildfire through the packed ballroom. Competitors and financial analysts murmured behind their cocktail glasses, eagerly consuming the scandalous corporate gossip. Tristan basked in the attention, actually believing he had successfully manipulated the entire room into siding with his fake empire. He puffed out his chest standing at the bar, completely convinced his fraudulent offshore merger had made him a billionaire. I thought he had outsmarted the law and outsmarted me. He thought the night belonged entirely to him and his stolen wealth. He took another long sip of expensive champagne, raising his glass to toast his own fabricated genius, while completely ignoring the rapidly approaching storm. Then the heavy mahogany double doors at the main entrance of the ballroom swung wide open. The sudden aggressive movement caught the immediate attention of the event photographers stationed near the red carpet. A collective gasp rippled through the nearest crowd, causing a rapid ripple effect that completely silenced the noisy champagne bar. The malicious whispering died instantly in the cold air. The string quartet playing softly in the corner seemed to fade entirely into the background as every single head in the massive room turned toward the entrance to witness the disruption. The heavy oak doors locked into place, remaining wide open. I stepped over the threshold, crossing into the ballroom. I wore a breathtaking emerald green gown that swept the marble floor, radiating absolute unyielding power and complete confidence. I did not walk in looking like a discarded founder or a bitter, hysterical ex-girlfriend. I walked in looking like the owner of the entire building. My right hand rested securely on the arm of Declan, who wore a tailored black tuxedo that screamed generational wealth and terrifying corporate dominance. We moved with the synchronized predatory grace of executives who held the fate of everyone in the room in the palms of our hands. We commanded the absolute focus of the entire elite gathering. But we did not arrive alone. Walking immediately behind us, projecting an aura of terrifying institutional authority, was Jonathan, the billionaire chairman of the Apex board. His very presence at a gala was a rare, highly coveted occurrence that sent immediate shockwaves of panic and awe through the attending investors. Flanking Jonathan was Jamal, stepping smoothly in a pristine charcoal suit, carrying the quiet, lethal confidence of a corporate attorney who had already won the war before the battle even started. Jamal surveyed the room with the sharp, analytical gaze of a man preparing to read a death sentence to a guilty criminal. His presence alone signaled absolute legal destruction. The power dynamic in the massive room shifted instantly and violently. The wealthy investors who had just been drinking Tristan's champagne and listening to Serena's lies suddenly stepped away from them as if they were carrying a highly contagious disease. Every single camera flashed simultaneously, capturing my elegant entrance and the absolute armada of power backing my every step. Tristan stood frozen at the bar, his confident smile shattering into a million pieces as he stared at the terrifying reality marching toward him. Serena dropped her crystal flute onto a cocktail table, her hands shaking visibly as she realized her crude gossip was completely powerless against actual multi-billion-dollar authority. The trap was perfectly set, and they had nowhere left to run tonight. They were completely surrounded by the industry they had tried to manipulate. I held my head high, feeling the incredible weight of my impending victory. The ultimate corporate execution was about to commence right here on the glittering main stage. Tristan tried to swallow, but his throat was completely dry. He looked around the ballroom, desperately searching for a single friendly face, but found absolutely nothing except cold, calculating stares. The very people he had been trying to impress just moments ago were now looking at him like a dead man walking. He was isolated in a room filled with thousands of influential people. I squeezed Declan's arm, letting a razor-sharp smile form on my lips. We had cornered the arrogant thief, and now it was time to let him hang himself with his own illegal contract. The glittering ballroom transformed into a brutally efficient social slaughterhouse. The wealthy venture capitalists who had just been eager to drink Tristan's expensive champagne now actively treated him like a highly contagious disease. I stood beside Declan near the center of the room, watching the absolute destruction of Tristan's carefully manufactured reputation. Investors deliberately turned their backs as he approached, forming tight, exclusive circles around Declan to discuss the monumental power shift in the tech industry. Serena had completely vanished into the crowd, abandoning the sinking ship the moment she realized her crude gossip was utterly powerless against apex-level corporate authority. Tristan was entirely isolated. He paced the edge of the dance floor, his face flushed a dark, dangerous red, clutching a completely empty crystal glass. His chest heaved with shallow, frantic breaths as he watched his entire fake empire dissolve in real time. I knew the intense humiliation was pushing him straight toward the breaking point. I gently placed my hand on Declan's arm, leaning in close. "Keep them occupied," I murmured, projecting a calm confidence. "I am going to step out to the cloakroom for a moment. Give our desperate founder a false sense of opportunity." Declan offered a sharp, understanding smile before turning his full attention back to a group of eager shareholders. I gracefully navigated through the sea of designer gowns and tailored tuxedos, slipping out the heavy side doors into the quiet, secluded corridor. The heavy thud of the ballroom doors closing behind me instantly muted the loud, aggressive bass of the gala band. The long hallway was dimly lit, lined with expensive artwork and thick velvet curtains. I walked slowly toward the luxury coat check, completely unbothered, enjoying the rare moment of absolute silence. I heard the aggressive, heavy footsteps before I even saw him. The heavy doors burst open, and Tristan stormed into the corridor, moving with the frantic, reckless energy of a cornered predator. He spotted me standing near the marble pillars and closed the distance in 3 massive strides. "You think you are so brilliant, Meredith?" Tristan snarled, his voice echoing sharply down the empty hallway. "You think you can just parade in here with your new billionaire boss and destroy my life?" He backed me directly against the cold marble pillar, planting his hands on the stone on either side of my shoulders, trapping me. The sour smell of cheap alcohol and pure panic radiated off his tailored suit. I did not flinch. I did not break eye contact. "I destroyed absolutely nothing, Tristan," I replied, my voice completely devoid of fear. "You destroyed your own company the moment you decided your massive ego was more valuable than the woman actually keeping your servers online. I am simply watching the structural collapse." Tristan slammed his fist against the marble, his face twisting into a mask of pure, unhinged rage. "I made you," he screamed, completely abandoning the polished executive persona he had spent years crafting. "You were nothing before I gave you a title. You were just a pathetic workaholic writing code in a miserable apartment. I gave you a platform, I gave you a brand, and you paid me back by staging a federal injunction to steal my wealth. You are a vindictive, bitter spinster who could not handle the fact that I upgraded to a woman with actual class." His absolute refusal to take accountability was staggering. "You upgraded to a liability," I corrected him, my tone dropping to a lethal whisper. "Serena folded the second she realized you were broke. And you never gave me a platform, Tristan. I built the platform so you could stand on it and pretend you were tall. You are a financial parasite." The sheer brutal honesty of my words snapped the last remaining thread of his fragile sanity. Tristan's eyes went completely dark. His jaw clenched and he aggressively drew his right hand back, his fingers curling into a tight, heavy fist. He fully intended to strike me right there in the secluded hallway to physically punish the woman who had stripped him of his fake power. He threw the punch with all his weight behind it. The strike never landed. A massive, powerful hand shot out from the heavy shadows of the velvet curtains, grabbing Tristan's wrist in midair with a terrifying, bone-crushing grip. Tristan let out a sharp gasp of pain, his forward momentum halting instantly. Jamal stepped fully into the dim light, his pristine charcoal suit catching the faint glow of the corridor sconces. My brother-in-law did not raise his voice. He did not yell. He simply tightened his vice grip on Tristan's wrist, applying an excruciating amount of pressure that made the disgraced founder drop to his knees. Under the Illinois Criminal Code Section 12-3, Jamal recited, his deep, resonant voice echoing with absolute legal authority. "Committing a physical battery against a corporate executive carries severe mandatory sentencing guidelines. But beyond the criminal statutes, Tristan, you are currently attempting to assault the sister-in-law of a senior partner at a Tier 1 corporate law firm. If you so much as breathe heavily in her direction again, I will personally ensure you spend the next decade rotting in a federal penitentiary." Tristan let out a pathetic whimpering sound, desperately struggling to free his wrist from Jamal's unyielding iron grip. Jamal stared down at him with pure, unadulterated disgust, before shoving the executive's arm away with a violent, dismissive motion. Tristan stumbled backward, crashing into the opposite wall and clutching his bruised wrist. He actually thought he still held the ultimate trump card. "Enjoy your little intellectual property victory," Tristan spat, his voice trembling with manic defiance. "It does not matter. I signed a massive foreign merger today. The money clears tonight, and I will be completely untouchable." I looked at the man who just confessed to committing massive corporate fraud, and I smiled a cold, terrifying smile. I left Tristan standing in the dimly lit hallway, nursing his bruised wrist and his fatally inflated ego. Jamal walked silently beside me, adjusting his suit jacket, his expression radiating absolute professional satisfaction. We slipped back through the heavy mahogany doors, re-entering the blinding brilliance of the grand ballroom. The underlying tension in the room had amplified during our brief absence. Wealthy investors and tech journalists were practically vibrating with anticipation, constantly glancing toward the main stage. Declan and Jonathan stood exactly where I had left them. Declan handed me a fresh glass of sparkling water. I took a slow sip and offered a single decisive nod. The trap was fully primed. A sharp electronic chime echoed through the massive sound system, instantly silencing the noisy crowd. The master of ceremonies stepped up to the grand podium positioned at the center of the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen," the host announced, his voice booming across the silent ballroom. "We invite the keynote speakers to the stage to share their visionary announcements regarding the future of the global technology sector." Before the host could even finish his introduction, Tristan pushed his way through the crowd. He practically leaped up the short flight of stairs, his face flushed a dark, feverish red. He ignored the visible wine stains on his white collar, completely blinded by his desperate need for public validation. Tristan aggressively grabbed the microphone from the host, not even waiting for a proper introduction. "Good evening," Tristan declared, his voice unnaturally loud and strained. "Many of you have heard ridiculous, unfounded rumors circulating tonight. You have heard desperate lies manufactured by a bitter former employee who simply lacked the mental stability to handle the pressures of an executive lifestyle." He looked directly at me, standing in the center of the room. His eyes were wide and manic, filled with a toxic mixture of sheer terror and staggering arrogance. "But I am not standing on this stage to discuss the pathetic jealousy of my competitors," Tristan continued, projecting a false, booming confidence. "I am here to announce the ultimate triumph of PulseTech. We are expanding on a massive, unprecedented global scale." A low murmur rippled through the crowd of investors. Tristan gripped the edges of the podium, his knuckles turning completely white. "Today, I successfully executed a monumental corporate merger," Tristan announced, practically shouting into the microphone. "PulseTech has officially partnered with Vanguard Global, a highly aggressive offshore foreign equity fund. This merger guarantees a massive, immediate cash infusion that will launch our dynamic artificial intelligence tracking algorithms into every single international market. We are completely bypassing domestic limitations. We are moving faster and striking harder than legacy conglomerates who rely on stealing talent to stay relevant." I was openly mocking apex innovations on a stage in front of the entire industry. Declan simply took a slow sip of his drink, looking at Tristan with the clinical fascination of a scientist observing a doomed insect. Jonathan stood with his arms crossed, a terrifyingly calm smile playing on his lips. Tristan genuinely believed he was delivering the fatal blow. He had no idea he was broadcasting his own federal crimes to a room full of potential witnesses. "To prove our absolute dominance and solidify this historic partnership," Tristan declared, his voice reaching a fever pitch, "I have invited the lead representative of Vanguard Global to join me on this stage tonight. We will conduct a ceremonial signing of the final closing documents right here in front of all of you. This is what real visionary leadership looks like. This is what happens when you refuse to let incompetent deadweight drag down your empire." Tristan dramatically pulled a heavy leather binder from inside his ruined suit jacket and slammed it down onto the podium. He flipped it open, revealing the dense legal paperwork he had blindly signed earlier that afternoon in a stale hotel room. He picked up a gold fountain pen and held it out toward the audience, his chest heaving with frantic, shallow breaths. He was physically shaking, vibrating with the desperate need to secure his fraudulent payout. From the very back of the ballroom, a tall, distinguished man began walking down the central aisle. The crowd naturally parted for him, sensing the immense authority radiating from his deliberate, measured strides. He wore a pristine, tailored suit and dark-tinted glasses that obscured his face. He carried a sleek black briefcase, moving with the cold, calculating precision of a corporate executioner. Tristan beamed at the approaching figure, eagerly waving him up to the brightly lit stage. The entire ballroom held its collective breath. Investors leaned forward, straining to see the mysterious foreign representative who was supposedly handing Tristan a billion-dollar lifeline. The man climbed the stairs, his leather shoes clicking sharply against the metal grating. He walked directly up to the podium. Tristan practically shoved the gold fountain pen into the man's hand, sporting a triumphant, arrogant smirk. "Let us finalize this historic acquisition," Tristan said loudly into the microphone, ensuring every single journalist captured the moment. "Let us show the world who truly owns the future of fitness technology." The man did not take the gold pen. He did not look at the leather binder. He simply reached up and slowly removed his dark-tinted glasses, slipping them into the breast pocket of his tailored suit jacket. He turned his head and looked directly into Tristan's manic, bloodshot eyes. Tristan's triumphant smile instantly shattered into a million pieces. The color completely drained from his face, leaving him looking like a terrified ghost. He stumbled backward, violently crashing into the presentation screen behind the podium. His mouth opened and closed in absolute silent horror. He recognized the tall, imposing man standing directly before him. It was not a shadowy offshore investor providing an escape. It was the chief legal counsel for Apex Innovations. The stern man reached out and calmly took the microphone directly from Tristan's badly trembling right hand. He did not introduce himself immediately. He simply adjusted the height of the microphone stand, smoothing the lapels of his impeccable suit, while Tristan backed away, as if facing a loaded weapon. The massive ballroom was so silent you could hear the subtle hum of the stage lights. Investors who had been applauding moments ago now held their breath collectively, sensing a catastrophic shift in the atmosphere. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen," the man said, his voice echoing with crisp clinical authority. "Mr. Tristan just introduced me as the lead representative of Vanguard Global. That is a factually accurate statement. However, he conveniently omitted a highly critical piece of corporate context. My name is David. I am the chief legal counsel for Apex Innovations." A collective gasp ripped through the audience. Thousands of influential tech figures exchanged bewildered, horrified glances. Tristan gripped the edge of the presentation screen, his knuckles white, his chest heaving as his brain frantically tried to process the impossible reality. "Vanguard Global is not a shadowy offshore equity fund." David continued, projecting his words across the stunned crowd. "It is a fully registered domestic shell corporation. It is a wholly owned subsidiary of Apex Innovations, created specifically to absorb highly distressed technological assets." Tristan let out a strangled, pathetic sound. He lunged forward, reaching blindly for the microphone, but David simply stepped back, allowing a much more intimidating figure to take the floor. Jamal walked smoothly up the stage stairs, his charcoal suit immaculate, his presence radiating pure, unadulterated legal dominance. He took the microphone from David. He did not look at the audience. He turned his body completely sideways to look directly into Tristan's terrified, bloodshot eyes. "This afternoon, Mr. Tristan executed a highly expedited merger agreement with Vanguard Global," Jamal announced, his deep voice rolling like thunder across the glittering ballroom. In his absolute desperation to secure a rapid cash payout and flee his mounting domestic liabilities, he deliberately bypassed standard corporate due diligence. He ignored the frantic warnings of his own legal counsel, who quit on the spot. He signed a binding contract to sell his company for a massive sum of cash. Tristan shook his head violently, stepping backward. "You trapped me!" Tristan screamed, his voice cracking wildly. "This is illegal! You set up a fraudulent company to trick me into a merger. I will sue you. I will sue all of you for entrapment. Jamal offered a cold, terrifying smile. It is not entrapment when you voluntarily commit federal fraud to line your own pockets, Jamal stated, his tone dropping into a lethal, punishing register. Let me explain exactly how corporate law works to the crowd tonight. When you executed that rapid merger agreement, Tristan, you encountered a highly specific collateral clause. You were required to legally verify the structural integrity of your assets. Jamal stepped closer, forcing Tristan to shrink back against the digital display board. By signing that merger, you explicitly guaranteed you owned the intellectual property free and clear, Jamal declared. You checked a box swearing under penalty of perjury that PulseTech held absolute unencumbered ownership of the dynamic tracking algorithm. You do not. My client Meredith revoked your software license entirely on federal record hours before you signed that paper. Tristan opened his mouth, but no sound emerged. His entire body trembled violently as the invisible legal noose snapped tight around his throat. You lied to an acquiring entity. Jamal continued, delivering the final devastating blow. You have officially committed securities fraud and wire fraud. And because you were so blinded by your own greed, you recklessly pledged 100% of your personal shares, your bank accounts, and your physical assets as collateral for any breach of contract. You breached that contract the exact second your pen left the paper. Therefore, Apex Innovations now legally owns your entire company, your servers, and your personal estate for exactly $0. The ballroom erupted into sheer, absolute pandemonium. Journalists shoved past each other, frantically typing the breaking news on their phones. Wealthy venture capitalists who had backed PulseTech shouted in furious disbelief, realizing Tristan had just flushed their investments down the drain to save himself. Serena, who was standing near the back exit, let out a sharp, terrified shriek, realizing the man she had banked her entire future on was now completely destitute and facing severe criminal charges. Tristan collapsed. His knees buckled, giving out entirely under the crushing weight of his monumental failure. He hit the stage floor hard, gripping his own hair as he stared blankly at the polished wood. He had nothing. He had no money. He had no home. He handed everything over to the woman he fired 2 days ago. He looked down into the crowd and found my eyes. I stood next to Declan, my posture straight, radiating absolute unyielding victory. I did not offer him a single ounce of pity. Then a new sound pierced the chaotic noise of the ballroom. It started as a faint, high-pitched wail echoing from the city streets below. Within seconds, the noise multiplied, growing rapidly louder and more aggressive. The distinct piercing wail of police sirens bled through the heavy walls of the convention center. Through the towering glass windows of the lobby, flashing red and blue lights painted the walls in frantic, erratic patterns. The heavy mahogany doors at the main entrance burst open for a second time tonight. A dozen federal agents wearing dark windbreakers with the letters FBI emblazoned across their backs stormed into the venue. They moved with swift, tactical precision, parting the sea of wealthy investors and making a direct line straight for the main stage. Tristan remained kneeling on the floor. He slowly turned his head to watch the federal agents march up the stairs. His arrogant facade shattered entirely. He finally realized his corporate life was completely and utterly over. The lead federal agent crested the final step of the stage, moving with a terrifying swiftness that left absolutely no room for negotiation. Tristan did not even try to stand up. He remained collapsed on the polished wooden floor of the stage, his breath hitching in loud, pathetic gasps. "Stand up and place your hands behind your back," the agent commanded, his voice booming through the silent ballroom without the need for a microphone. "You are under arrest for federal wire fraud, securities fraud, and the deliberate misrepresentation of intellectual property to a corporate entity." Tristan looked around wildly, his eyes darting toward the sea of wealthy investors who had been ready to crown him a visionary king just 10 minutes ago. "Help me!" Tristan shrieked, his voice cracking into a high-pitched whine that echoed off the crystal chandeliers. "Somebody call my lawyers. I am the chief executive officer of PulseTech. You cannot do this to me. This is a massive misunderstanding." Jamal stood a few feet away, straightening his pristine charcoal suit. You fired your legal counsel this afternoon, Tristan Jamal stated, his deep voice radiating absolute clinical satisfaction. And as of 20 minutes ago, you do not own a single share of PulseTech. You have no company. You have no lawyers. You have nothing but the handcuffs currently being secured around your wrists. The sharp metallic click of the steel cuffs snapping shut resonated loudly. The federal agents hauled Tristan roughly to his feet. His custom-tailored suit was wrinkled and stained with sweat, his perfect hair disheveled. He looked exactly like the desperate, fraudulent coward he had always been. As the agents marched him down the center aisle of the ballroom, the elite crowd of tech billionaires and venture capitalists actively stepped back, pulling their expensive garments out of his way. They looked at him with pure, unadulterated disgust. He was being paraded through the very industry he had tried to conquer, stripped of his wealth, his freedom, and his dignity. While all eyes were fixed on Tristan's humiliating exit, Serena was frantically executing her own cowardly escape plan. She had abandoned her champagne glass on a cocktail table and was currently sprinting toward the heavy service doors near the catering kitchens. She hiked up the skirt of her vibrant red designer gown, her high heels clicking frantically against the marble floor. She actually thought she could slip out through the service elevator, hail a cab, and vanish into the night before anyone remembered her involvement. She violently pushed the heavy kitchen door open, only to crash directly into the solid chest of a uniformed federal officer. Serena stumbled backward, losing her balance and falling hard onto the polished marble. Two more officers stepped out from the service corridor, completely blocking her only exit. "You are making a huge mistake," Serena yelled, scrambling backward like a cornered rat. "I am just a marketing executive. I had nothing to do with the merger agreement. Tristan lied to me too. I am a victim here." Jamal walked slowly toward the service doors, carrying his heavy leather briefcase. He looked down at Serena with a cold, predatory smile. "You lost your victim status the moment you used verified corporate channels to launch a malicious smear campaign against my sister-in-law," Jamal said smoothly. The officers hauled Serena to her feet, ignoring her frantic protests. "You are being detained as a direct accessory to corporate fraud and for executing coordinated commercial slander," Jamal informed her, his tone lethal and uncompromising. "You conspired to manipulate market valuation through deliberate public defamation. Enjoy your ride in the squad car, Serena." Serena began sobbing uncontrollably, her expensive mascara running down her cheeks as the officers secured her wrists. She screamed Tristan's name, but he was already being shoved into the back of a federal transport vehicle outside the convention center. They had built an empire on lies, and I had just watched the federal government burn it to the ground. Declan placed a warm, steady hand on the small of my back, gently guiding me toward the main exit. Jonathan nodded at us, a terrifyingly proud smile on his face, as he turned to address the remaining stunned investors. The war was officially over. We walked out of the convention center and stepped into the cool night air. The sleek black Maybach was waiting at the curb. Declan opened the heavy door for me, and we slid into the opulent leather interior, leaving the flashing red and blue police lights far behind us. The private cabin of the Maybach was silent and peaceful. I sank back against the plush leather, letting the absolute victory wash over me. My phone suddenly vibrated violently inside my evening clutch. I pulled the device out and looked at the glowing screen. I had missed 7 calls and received a frantic voicemail. The caller ID displayed my mother's name, Barbara. I pressed the speaker button, letting the audio fill the quiet car. "Meredith, please pick up." Barbara sobbed, her voice high and completely hysterical. "The bank just served us emergency foreclosure papers. They are locking our bank accounts. Tristan is not answering his phone, and the news is saying he was just arrested at the gala. We put up the house for his company, Meredith. We are going to lose everything tonight. You have to call your lawyers. You have to fix this right now. Please, Meredith, you cannot let your own parents go homeless." The desperate crying continued for another 10 seconds before the voicemail automatically ended. Declan looked at me, his dark eyes analyzing my reaction. He did not say a word, waiting to see if I would finally cave to the toxic suburban guilt that had plagued my entire life. I did not flinch. I did not shed a single tear for the people who had gladly offered me up as a sacrificial lamb to a con artist. I tapped my screen, pulling up the contact information for a local charity that provided temporary emergency housing for displaced families. I forwarded the shelter information directly to my mother's phone. I typed a single accompanying text message. "You bet your home on a man who humiliated me. I will not save you from your own greed." I hit send, powered off the device entirely, and dropped it back into my clutch. Declan smiled, a genuine, breathtaking expression of pure admiration. He reached across the center console and took my hand, his thumb brushing softly against my knuckles. "You are the most terrifying, brilliant woman I have ever met," Declan murmured, his voice rich with absolute certainty. The next morning, the sun rose over the city, casting brilliant golden light through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Apex Innovations penthouse suite. I stood near the glass, looking out over the sprawling metropolis that I now helped control. The skyline stretched endlessly, a vast empire of technological opportunity. I heard the quiet, heavy click of the executive office doors closing. Declan walked across the obsidian floor, moving with that same predatory grace that had intimidated me on the very first day we met. He did not go to his massive mahogany desk. He walked directly up behind me, wrapping his arms securely around my waist and pulling my back flush against his chest. "We acquired PulseTech's remaining server assets for exactly $1 this morning," Declan whispered, kissing the side of my neck. "The board unanimously approved the integration of your dynamic artificial intelligence algorithm. The global launch is scheduled for next month." I leaned back into his embrace, feeling the solid, unyielding support of a man who actually respected my intellect and matched my ambition. I turned around in his arms, looking up into his dark, calculating eyes. "I told you I would bury them." "Bury them," I replied, my voice radiating pure, untainted confidence. Declan smiled, reaching into the pocket of his tailored suit jacket. He pulled out a small black velvet box, flipping it open with his thumb. Resting inside on a bed of dark silk was a flawless, brilliantly cut diamond ring that caught the morning sunlight and scattered it across the walls. He did not drop to one knee. We were equals, standing eye to eye at the absolute pinnacle of our industry. "I canceled my blind date a long time ago," Declan said, his voice dropping into a low, intimate register as he took my left hand. "I think it is time we make this partnership permanent." He slipped the heavy diamond onto my finger. It fit perfectly. I looked past his shoulder, my eyes landing on the massive, reclaimed mahogany desk in the center of the room. Resting proudly on the polished wood, catching the golden morning light, was a newly minted heavy crystal nameplate. It read, "Meredith, Co-Chief Executive Officer of Apex Innovations." I had walked into this building with my life packed in a cardboard box, and I was never going to leave. I had achieved pure, absolute victory. True security never comes from seeking validation from toxic relatives or ungrateful partners. When people constantly diminish your achievements or try to exploit your loyalty, walking away is not a failure. It is an act of profound respect. The ultimate revenge is not about destroying those who wronged you, but about building an independent, successful life firmly on your own terms. By setting uncompromising boundaries and protecting your assets, you reclaim your power completely. Have you ever had to cut ties with toxic people to protect your peace? Share your unique story below, and please remember to hit